In one of my recent videos, I mentioned the Black Panther series, Black Panther movie, and the sequel, Wakanda Forever. And I showed some box numbers. And I just wanted to come back and just dive a little bit into that and why I mentioned that in that particular video. I had a conversation once again with a friend, and he was a defender of the Wakanda Forever. As I stated before, I was a recaster, and I'm still a recaster for the character of T'Challa. But he was one of those who could take it or leave it or just get over it type of a person. And when the movie came out and it did not perform as well as Black Panther, his excuse was that all sequels do worse than the original movies. And while that's partially true, yes, there are a good number of sequels that do worse than the original movie. There are also some that do better. But as I thought about it, I said, well, why are we comparing apples to oranges? Why not compare apples to apples? Marvel under Kevin Feige did something unprecedented. As of July 2023, the Marvel Cinematic Universe series has grossed over $29 billion, and 13 of the Marvel movies have grossed over $1 billion. So why would we take a movie in this amazing Marvel universe? Why would we compare it to outside movies? Why don't we compare it to the performance of other movies within the MCU dynamic? And so when you look at it that way, then you change the question. The question isn't, do all sequels do worse than the originals? The question now is, do MCU sequels do worse than the original movie? And in this video, I'm going to answer that question. Before I answer the question, there are a couple of things I need to explain. First of all, I'm going to be using a website called The Numbers. I like it better than Box Office Mojo because with the numbers, you get to see the production cost and all the other details, but they have something really cool. You can actually compare a performance of one movie to another movie. And when you're talking about sequels, it's the perfect way to compare it. They'll even give you a breakdown of week-to-week comparison to box office numbers. It's really detailed. I really like it. And so, again, I'll be using the Numbers website. The second thing I want to mention before I go forward is that I'm going to mention adjusting the box office for inflation. And what I mean there is over the last several years, the average cost of a ticket price in America has risen. The estimates are anywhere from as low as 11% to as high as 20%. So a lot of these first movies in a series, they came out before that hike in ticket prices. And so when we adjust it for inflation, what we're saying is, given the number of tickets sold at today's inflated ticket price, this is what it would make in today's market. The third and final thing I want to mention is that I'm only talking about the first and second movie in a series. I'm not talking about the third or the fourth release. I know some of the movies in Marvel have as many as 4 movies in their series. I'm only talking about the performance of the second movie, the sequel to the original movie. And with those things out of the way, let's go forward. The first obvious question is, well, how many of the MCU properties actually have sequels? And the answer to that is 9 or 10, depending on how you count it. And what are those movies? Well, let's take a look at them. We have Ant-Man, The Avengers, Black Panther, Captain America, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy, Iron Man, Spider-Man, even though it's a joint venture with Sony, and you have Thor. The possible 10th would be Captain Marvel, but we know that the Captain Marvel 2 was renamed The Marvels because of Brie Larson's waning popularity with the fan base. But once it comes out, if not in name, at least in spirit, it is Captain Marvel 2. And at that point, we would have had 10 of the MCU properties with sequels. But right now, as I record this, at the beginning of August, that movie hasn't come out. So at this date, only 9 of the MCU properties have had sequels. Now, to the real question. Out of these 9 sequels, how many of them actually made less money than the original movie? And the answer to that is only 3. So that means out of the 9 MCU properties with sequels, 6 of them, the sequel actually did better than the original. So the majority of MCU films, again, comparing apples to apples, the majority of the MCU films do better than the first film in the series. And of the 3 that didn't do as well, Age of Ultron, Iron Man 2, and Wakanda Forever, those are the 3 sequels that did not do as well as the first. But in the case of Age of Ultron and Iron Man, and we will go into this, we see that they were both successful and they either did as well, depending on how you look at the numbers, or they only did a little less. The only one that came in grossly under the first one was the Wakanda Forever. And again, I think that's why my friend wanted to look at outside movies, outside the genre, instead of looking at MCU movies themselves. Again, what Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios did was amazing, and nobody else had done that. So why not compare apples to apples? Compare the performance of a sequel MCU movie to how the other MCU sequels have done versus their first movie. The Avengers in 2012, it was the first MCU movie that hit over $1 billion, and you see that it made $1.5 billion worldwide. Its sequel, Age of Ultron, in 2015, it made $1.395 worldwide, so it made slightly less. Comparing the two charts, we see the 1.5 and the 1.3, and if you adjust it for inflation, you have 1.9, almost $2 billion for the Avengers. 2012 Avengers, if you adjust it for inflation, it made almost $2 billion, whereas Age of Ultron, in today's dollars, would make 1.7. Both movies were over $1 billion, but it is one of the 3 MCU movies that did not do as well or better than its predecessor. And again, I remind you that I'm talking about the second movie in a series, not the third or the fourth. Iron Man, it made $585 million worldwide, $318 million domestically. So more than half of that money came from domestic. The second Iron Man in 2010 made $621. Again, it made more. And when you look at the comparison charts, $585 million versus $621 unadjusted for inflation. When you add in the adjustment for inflation, interesting thing happens. In today's dollars, the first Iron Man would have made just under $30 million more than the second movie. So again, it's the second movie in the MCU to, depending on how you look at it, if you look at it unadjusted, then yes, the sequel did better. But when you adjust it for inflation, then actually the first Iron Man actually did a little better. And I think it's very interesting that when it comes to Age of Ultron versus the first Avengers, and when it comes to Iron Man versus Iron Man 2, both of these movies are very close in what they earned. So the sequel did as well as the first movie, if not better, depending on how you look at the numbers. Of course, we know about Black Panther. Again, it made that $700 million domestically, which outperformed domestically Infinity War. I'm going to keep saying that. But 1.3 worldwide. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, when it came out, it had 453 domestically. So even in today's dollars, it underperformed domestically. Again, that's that split in the Black Panther fan base over the decision by Marvel and Nate Moore and Kevin Feige not to recast T'Challa. There are plenty of eligible Black talented male actors out there who would have loved to take that role. But no, they made the decision not to do it. So this is what you get, Unadjusted for inflation, $1.3 billion for Black Panther and only $853 million for Wakanda Forever. And this is really interesting. When you adjust for inflation, which means you have to adjust Black Panther, which came out in 2018, if you adjust it to reflect today's numbers, it would have made $1.5 billion. It's only Wakanda Forever that grossly underperformed the previous installment, and that was Black Panther. It did not live up to Black Panther, and that's because the MCU broke the Black Panther fandom by choosing not to recast the character of T'Challa and then killing him off and then having to do this lame excuse for why this character died, even though he's in the most technologically advanced nation on earth, even though he has the heart-shaped herb in his system, but still he died from some mysterious disease. Yeah, right. So to answer my friend's question, No, when it comes to the MCU movies, this 29 plus billion dollar machine, no, most of their sequels do better than the original.